Lake Champlain, the village of Saint-Armand hides a treasure trove of information for those interested in Quebec's Black history. According to local legend, Nigger Rock is the name of a burial site where large numbers of black slaves were buried between 1794 and 1833. These slaves would have arrived with the first Loyalist settlers in 1784. Although the tale has been debated by neighbors and has been the source of family quarrels for many generations, Dominique Soulier, the president of the Historical Center in Saint-Armand, has been moving heaven and earth to preserve and integrate the heritage of Black citizens into the history of Saint-Armand.
Alors, je tiens dans mes mains une pancarte qui était accrochée à côté du cimetière familial de la famille Luke, donc au Nigger Rock.
By 1709, New France had begun to find those who helped slaves flee. It is obvious that there were many escape attempts. In the forest behind the church, there is a 25-foot deep ravine where people hid whenever the bells tolled.
Les cloches sonnaient d'une manière spécifique aussitôt qu'un étranger arrivait à cheval et qui représentait potentiellement un danger, à savoir c'était peut-être un chasseur d'esclaves.
Ça veut aussi dire que ces esclaves qui fuyaient à l'esclavage pouvaient se faire poursuivre jusqu'au Canada par des propriétaires des États américains pouvaient envoyer quelqu'un les chercher juste ici.
Il n'y a qu'à descendre dans la grotte pour vraiment ressentir ce que c'est que d'être dans le noir, sous terre, et puis d'avoir des gens à ses trousses. Et tout ce qui a pu leur passer par la tête à ce moment-là, c'est inimaginable. C'est sûrement quelque chose de très angoissant d'entendre les cloches qui sonnent et de savoir qu'il y a quelqu'un qui va essayer de nous mettre la main dessus pour nous ramener dans un état de servitude.
In a 9,000-acre lot an hour away from Detroit, Elgin Settlement, now the town of Buxton in Ontario, played a particularly important role in the Underground Railroad.
You see, so much of our story isn't being told in his story, you know what I mean? I like to say that so much because we have overcome so much to get to where we've come from, to get to where we are. And there are so many inspiring stories just within our own community. We don't have to look up to any idols that are, you know, famous stars or anything. We can just look back to our family trees, look back into what we've already accomplished, what our people have gotten through, you know what I mean, to feel that pride, because there's so much that we have done, you know. One story that just keeps me going is this brother by the name of Harry Thomas. He was a runaway slave back in the day, and he tried to escape from slavery 13 times, and on the last time he made it here to Buxton, you know. But every time before that he was caught and brought back beat worse than before. So even if he would have quit on the 12th time, nobody would have blamed him, and he just would have been another slave that didn't make it, you know. But he had that determination to keep going, and he died here on his own farm. So, you know, stuff like that that's very moving to me, just to see that happen. So.
Christopher Prince is a farmer and a graduate student with a degree in African Canadian history. He is in charge of youth activities during the Buxton Homecoming. Today, approximately 100 residents of the town, as well as thousands of people who come from across Canada and the United States, take part in the annual celebrations. Many important events are reenacted by the curator of the museum, Shannon Prince, who explains that the story began in 1854 with Reverend William King.
Reverend King, he was, to me, he was a visionary, because I guess when he was first introduced to slavery, when he married into a slaveholding family, and became appalled with the idea of owning slaves. And so his wife, since she owned slaves, he figured, well, I marry her and I can free them now. But you couldn't do that in the South. So he treated them better than most, if you will, because, you know, he taught them how to read and write and taught them a variety of skills also. He wanted to prove to them that, yes, you can become self-sufficient and self-sustaining given the same opportunities as whites.
The quality of education in Buxton earned such a high reputation across Canada that even white people sent their children there. Many returned to the United States to advance the cause of other blacks and help them achieve better education.
People came to Canada for freedom, but they came to Buxton to educate their children. So the first congressman in Alabama, the first 10 or 12 principals of high school, there were 6 lawyers, 2 circuit court judges, principal of one university, and a doctor coroner. They were all educated here in Buxton. That became first great blacks in history in the United States.
In Alberta, Leon Jamerson, the last black cowboy in Canada, is one of the last remaining figures representing the tradition of black pioneers, cowboys, farmers, miners, and lumberjacks who played an important part in opening up Canada's West.
I had me a woman, it wouldn't be true. Made me for my money and she made me blue. A man needs a woman that he can lean on, but my leaning post is done left and gone. She's long and gone, and now I'm lonesome blue. I'm gonna find me a river, one that's cold as ice. I'm gonna find me a river, Lord, I'm gonna pay the price. I'm going down in it 3 times, but Lord, I'm only coming up twice.
Well, the first black population that came to British Columbia came in 1858. Actually, you can pinpoint it to one particular year, because that was the year of the gold rush. So when they found gold up in the Fraser Valley and up in the interior of British Columbia.
Wade Compton founded Hogan's Alley Memorial Project in 2002 in order to preserve the legacy of this Vancouver neighborhood. He is also an English professor, a poet, and an editor, and has edited an anthology of black British Columbian literature and orature.
I mean, that period attracted people from all over the world, right? That was also when the first Chinese came to British Columbia and Japanese. Lots of Americans came up. And, but the interesting thing about the black community is that those first blacks came as a community.
The blacks that came here were treated very well. They were treated like any other origin, ethnic people. They were able to buy land just the same as any other person and get farms or get trades or whatever they wanted to do, they were able to do.
Karen Alexander Hochschild is the president of the British Columbia Black History Awareness Society. She is also a descendant of Charles and Nancy Alexander, who arrived in British Columbia in 1861. Charles Alexander helped build the first school and the first church in Shady Creek.
But you have to remember, too, that they were invited here. They had a letter of invitation from the governor of the province at the time. So, of course, they weren't expecting any problems. They were expecting it to be a land of freedom, etc. His real motivation was to keep this part of Canada Canadian. Because if the South, the United States had drawn the 49th parallel right across, this end of the island would have been American. So he wanted more settlers here to make a bigger population to make this Canadian. And I think, personal opinion here, I think his other motivation is the man was half black himself. And I think he was inviting blacks up here so that he wouldn't be the only one. Mind you, He kept that secret.
I can't imagine the system or the social system that the blacks in Shelburne were exposed to, because you had freed blacks, you had blacks that owned some businesses. At the same time, you had indentured blacks, and you had enslaved blacks. In families even, one would be enslaved and one not. I really can't even imagine how a person made sense of that in their own mind, to see the different levels or the different caste system, if you will, within the black community in one town.
C'était très varié. On sait qu'il y en a qui avaient un compte ouvert à l'auberge et qui consommaient. Alors, on sait que, exemple, Morris de Blackman, lui, a payé une tournée générale, et puis à sa table, il y avait John de Potter et ainsi de suite. Il y en avait un autre qui avait commandé des cordes de violon, qui s'était acheté des pantalons. Donc, on peut tout de suite supposer que ces gens-là travaillaient.
As I said earlier, and I hope you will mention this, the Charter of the City of St. John in 1785, when it was first developed and incorporated, forbid the black man to even fish in the river, of the St. John River. We weren't allowed as blacks to even fish in the river. And that today, if you go to any of our museums, and the New Brunswick Museum still has the charter, the first St. John City Charter, which states that in black and white. The Negroes were not allowed to fish in the St. John River and sell the goods thereof.
What does this piece of land represent to you?
To me, this is my background heritage, which no longer really exists. They've redeveloped it. They tore it down. That's where our theater was, where we'd come and go to the show, because most of the other theaters in the city didn't want us. It was, I mean, I'm talking the 50s. It was still hard times. You can't even go home if you're of a black person in the city of St. John. 80% of us cannot go home because there's no place to go home to.
How does it make you feel?
I've accepted it. I truly have accepted it, because if you don't start accepting things in life and working around it, you'll never develop. Never develop. To me, I can stand here and I can look you in the eye and say, I'm home. I know what it was. I know where I came from.
Donc ils étaient là, ils formaient le tissu, mais on les comptait pas. On les comptait pas parce qu'on ne les acceptait pas. Ils étaient là quand même depuis le 17e siècle. Donc ils sont aussi québécois que les Québécois blancs.
Il y a eu des artistes célèbres dans l'histoire de la musique noire qui se sont arrêtés souvent à Saint-Armand. On dirait quasiment comme un rituel. Ils arrêtaient. À Saint-Armand, ils restaient une semaine, ils performaient. Et après ça, ils remontaient sur Montréal.
They just loved Montreal because they were free. They weren't treated the way they were treated in the States. All over St. Catherine Street, you had clubs. On the off streets, you had clubs. I mean, this was rocking. Now, I'm older. I still want to rock a little bit. I'm not finished rocking yet. got no place to go. But back then, the Esquire, you had Rockheads, you had the Harlem Paradise, 99, you went to other clubs, you went here, you went there. You had things to do, people to see, and anybody who came here and anybody who went back to where they lived, overseas or something like that, would tell, listen, if you want to have a good time, go to Montreal or go to Rockhead's Paradise.
Montreal was seen as the Paris of North America, and Little Willie knows its history because he played in many of its jazz clubs.
Is I'm not going in nobody's back door. If I can't go in the front door, like everybody else, come on, what are you telling me? I'm not as good as you then. That's what you're telling me.
Nous avons été racistes. La société canadienne-française a été raciste. Ça, faut pas se le cacher, c'est comme ça. L'histoire est là pour le démontrer. Et moi, j'ai été élevé comme un raciste. Au Collège des Trois-Rivières, c'est-à-dire le séminaire Saint-Joseph des Trois-Rivières, on était racistes. Et j'ai rencontré des racistes dans ma carrière, tout le long de ma carrière. Nous avons été racistes. Donc, est-ce que les Noirs sont acceptés depuis longtemps? Je dirais non.
This tolerance is it's kind of like a two-edged sword, you know. I'm not particularly fond of the word because to me to tolerate something is usually you do that because you have to, legally you have to do it, or it's the right thing to do. It's not something that you feel in your heart that's the right thing to do, but you tolerate people. And but I think what we have to do in this world is to learn to appreciate and respect others, people. Tolerating people is not enough.
Driving through Elm Hill, located just south of Gagetown, New Brunswick, it might be difficult to understand the sense of belonging and nostalgia some people have for this part of the world. However, with Elm Hill's history, it is much more than a rural village. James Skip Talbot has wonderful memories of summers spent in Elm Hill during his childhood. So much so that he comes back as often as he can and has even set up a trailer on the land his grandmother used to own. The annual Roots Picnic is now a rare and much appreciated reunion of people who have roots in Elm Hill.
Their life was that of a small farm community where people worked in the woods, people worked on there were a lot of riverboats in the early days, and people worked on the riverboats and traveled up and down the St. John River Valley. People worked in the lumber industry here. People fished over the lake. People moved back and forth between here and Maine. There was a lot of stories of a lot of connection between Maine and New Brunswick. The beauty that existed in the past in Elm Hill still exists today. It's just a beautiful area. Unfortunately, people have left here through the years, you know, searching better opportunities abroad in other parts of Canada and the United States. And that's why the